Good afternoon, or morning, or evening, or podcast, or dog walking time, or wherever and whenever you are tuning in. And welcome to Tech Bugs and Rock and Roll, a weekly pod. And it is weekly because last week we weren't here, so we did it in advance, like on real TV.
No.
So,
yeah, let us know how you liked the music geek out and the lack of liveness during the recording, and we will do more of those on those occasions when
somebody left a comment on the pre-recorded version, the YouTube stream for that, saying that I'm the only person under 70 who's ever heard of Sky, which I thought was kind of fun because last week we pre-recorded a geek out. We were talking about music and bands and all that kind of stuff. So Origami Marie says you're still hitting the theme song a little early at the start of the stream. So the difficulty is that so basically what we do on StreamYard is we hit go live, and once go live says yes, you are live, we push the button. And if we push the button later, what you'll get is anywhere between 0 and 30 seconds of the two of us kind of going, is it on? Is it working? Yes, it's unfortunately live streaming on the internet isn't live. It's almost live, and no one can tell you how live it is or give you any sort of degree of control and precision over how live it gets. So thank you very much for the feedback. There's nothing we can do about it.
There's not. Eli has been wrangling date times in Python all day, and they still don't understand why it wouldn't pass their strings properly. I will see your wrangling date times in Python because I've been a Go programmer for the last 3 weeks, and so I actually had to do the thing that Dylan told me about that ended up in the worst programming language ever, and use that magic date time to format the current date time into a file name. And it was every bit as stupid as I thought it was. Absolutely stupid. So, yes.
Date time formatting in Go is the point when clearly the Go language committee went, you know what? Everything we've done so far has made sense and it's all quite good. Enough of that. Let's do this. Hey, Joel, welcome to the stream. To format a date in, what is it? You have to write the date you want as if it was the first of...
It's the 2nd of January.
No, it's the first of... It's American format. So the idea is they said, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is easy to remember.
Yes.
So they said this will be the first day of the second month of the third year of the millennium. So February the 1st, 2003.
At 4:05 p.m.
4:05 p.m. and 6 seconds. And then they went
with UTC +7, I think, for the time zone.
No, it's UTC -7 because UTC -7 is Mountain
time,
and UTC +7 is I don't know, somewhere
in Asia,
Tel Aviv and Tokyo. Being the places I've been that are either side of that number. So,
but and so because I had it in the worst programming language, obviously somebody on YouTube decided to pick a fight with me about it. And their argument was that DDMMYYYY is Anglo-centric.
Yes.
Because it's day, month, year, hours, minutes, seconds, and they're not necessarily called those things in other languages. And so, but you're kind of like, yes, but your word for integer probably isn't integer, but you still call it an int. Shut up.
Allende once wrote .NET in Hebrew just to see if he could. And you can not only can you use the Hebrew alphabet. Now Hebrew's a right to left language.
With no vowels.
So so you have public static void, and then but as you move the cursor along the line of code, it goes from moving to the right to moving to the left to moving to the right again. It's the strangest thing.
Yeah.
But So, yes, Eli says, good to know I've immediately derailed this week's podcast. We don't really have rails. That's not how any of this works. We have a series of safety nets in case we run out of things to yak about.
But if someone says
Kinda how this
something
works.
interesting just as we're starting, we're going to dive into it. That's what we're here for.
I had a comment on one of my YouTube videos. You were just talking about, people picking fights on the internet. Actually, I had 2 comments this week which have stuck with me. One of them is as part of a YouTube short I did 2 weeks ago now about using AI to write session abstracts for conferences. I picked what I thought was the worst idea ever for a talk that might get accepted at a conference if the program committee weren't doing their jobs, which was how organizations should switch to Perl and CGI scripts to minimize SQL injection. And somebody on the comments defended Perl and got all upset and said, why do you always pick on Perl to do this kind of thing? And I'm like, Perl has not had, even pick the worst language you can think of. I bet they've released a version of it since 1994.
Yes.
Because Perl, 1994, and then it kind of rattled along like that until I think 2019, when they finally gave up trying to ship another version of Perl and decided that Perl 6 was going to be called Raku instead.
Yes.
And Perl is a fun language. I used it and I loved it, and it did a lot of things very, very well. And then it just didn't evolve, because one of the biggest challenges with evolving Perl is that the people who wrote it did not actually know what it was supposed to do, because the language had no grammar and no specification. It was its own reference implementation. So
somebody
basically,
once mathematically proved that you can't pass a Perl program without running it.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Anyway, the Perl fans are still out there, and they're still like, stop picking on Perl. And we're like, ship a new version and we'll talk.
I remember when somebody introduced me to Perl, and I'd been using a combination of awk and sed to do roughly the same things.
Yeah.
And then someone turned up who was fresh out of university and just went, why don't you use Perl? And I was like, because I've invested countless hours in actually learning awk and sed, and I know them, and take your new thing and get out of my office.
Yeah.
So I never really learned it.
I used it for a lot of things. It is probably the language in which I shipped the most code and earned the most money while understanding the least as I went along. It was, it was very good for little ad hoc scripts. I had a Perl script that would go through your MP3 collection and rename all the files and put them in folders based on their ID3 tags, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are. It is. I do not think a huge disrespect to Perl to say that it is not a good choice, and nobody should be switching to Perl in 2024 as a way of accomplishing anything other than winning a bet.
No, although Joel,
unless they're on awk and sed.
Unless they're on awk and sed, yes. But Joel is claiming that Perl is tormenting him on this very day in 2024. I'm sorry for that, Joel. I will send a digital hug. I learned the Dutch for hug.
What is the Dutch for hug?
Knuffel.
Knuffel, that's rather nice. Out of interest, why Dutch?
Why Dutch?
Yeah.
I want to move to Dutchland.
Oh, which one?
Probably Utrecht. So
Utrecht
yes,
is nice.
I sort of expressed an interest in emigrating there for like my retirement. And somebody said, oh, well, don't move to Amsterdam because it's all full of tourists smoking weed and everything. Utrecht is really nice. And I'm going to Utrecht at the end of June to do Azure Lowlands. So I'm looking forward to it. But yes.
Utrecht is fantastic. It is one of my favorite cities anywhere on this planet to visit.
So many people have said
lovely and delightful. And I can think of nothing better for it than you moving there in your retirement and lowering the tone.
Exactly. But no, I am. I'm going through some stuff. My depression's flaring up at the moment, and so feeling like I'm working towards that long-term goal by learning Dutch with Duolingo and drops is really, it helps. I'm kind of like going, I'm doing a thing. So yeah, I don't know if I'll
Awesome.
ever actually move there or not, but it's the plan at the moment. Also, Dutch has some brilliant words. So the Dutch for rhinoceros is nose horn.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, that's silly. And then I thought about where we get the word rhinoceros from. And it's from the Greek rhino, which means nose, and ceros, which means horn.
Horn.
And so we call it nose horn as well. We just use the
Yes.
Greek word.
Yes.
And today I learned the Dutch for gloves, which is handschoenen, which is hand shoes.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's lots of things like that in there, and I'm really enjoying it. It's great. And I know it's essentially pointless because if you had to choose the country with the best English language speakers in the world, it would be the Netherlands. But I think it's important to make an effort.
Eli says, "Did you know that pen and pencil aren't cognate? Neither are isle and island." This is like
No,
the
they're
old
not.
Bill Bailey thing about I like ham, but I'm not a hamster.
Yes. So cognate, for listeners who have no idea what that linguistics word means, it means that pen and pencil don't share the same root. So pen has a different etymology from pencil. Similarly, man and woman have completely separate etymologies. Woman.
Do you think that the word cognate comes from the same root as cog? Are cog and cognate? Do you think? My favorite completely non-cognate things is there are two English colloquialisms. One is a Charlie horse and the other is a cocaine mule, and they are completely different things, and neither of them has anything to do with quadrupeds. Because a Charlie horse is a type of muscle strain that's named after a baseball player called Charlie Hoss, who was prone to this particular kind of injury. And a cocaine mule is when you unwittingly give someone your bag to carry out of Mexico and they smuggle drugs for you.
Yes.
And of course, Charlie is street slang for cocaine. Obviously, I know that from my time on the street.
See, I only know that from watching the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer.
Yeah.
Where there's a discussion between him and the old lady about how Kevin Feige won't let them have cocaine in the movie.
Renee says, looking
forward to that.
Is Java and JavaScript cognate? No.
No,
they are not
about that.
Anyway, speaking about languages, PHP's usage has declined by 40% in just over 2 years.
It's dropping down the index.
And this, appears to be almost entirely because of a change in focus by WordPress.
Yes.
And Matt Mullenweg, who is the sort of WordPress chief WordPress person, isn't he? He's the founder and architect and everything. Basically, a couple of years ago said, WordPress is now when we add new things to it, we're going to do them in JavaScript. And so WordPress has become a JavaScript first ecosystem. And, WordPress has been phenomenally popular for a long, long time. Like running I saw like 60% once and of websites at one point were WordPress websites. And it works. It's nice. I've set up and run WordPress sites lots of times. And, apparently the sort of WordPress focus, means that the PHP is now in decline because of that. And the Tiobe index has it's dropped from 7th this time last year to I think 19th when I looked at it this morning.
Yes.
And it's interesting seeing. I've always thought this, you do this long enough, I think a lot of people, certainly for me, .NET was the first really shiny thing that came out after I started doing this for money. And so I learned programming in a world where there was C and there was C++ and there was Visual Basic and Awk and Cert and Perl and yada, 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 yada. And you kind of poke around with all the things and you're like, well, none of these languages was designed to solve the problems that, exist, because the web and data-driven web applications. And so, first Java and Cold Fusion and those kind of things. And then for me, .NET was the thing that went, this looks pretty good. Yes. And I think it's very easy to be like, well, obviously this solves all the problems properly and is the last one we'll ever need, which is blatantly not the case. Programming language innovation, it goes on for all kinds of reasons all the time. But So yeah, Eli.
So I was going to mention this tweet. Eli's mentioned the tweet where someone, and by someone they mean the kind of person who unironically has thought leader in their Twitter bio, said that programming is converging on Go, Rust, and JavaScript. And so if you're not learning at least one of those languages, then you're an idiot. And I just thought, no, it isn't.
I have a very simple rule that I apply to this. Never, ever take opinions on legacy code from somebody who uses a black and white profile picture because they think old things are classy. Like, do you know what was invented before Visual Basic? Color photography. If you're not going to at least embrace red, green, and blue, we do not want your spicy takes.
But no, I've been quite enjoying Go this week, and I will say their kind of one of their design goals for Go was that you shouldn't have to know it. It shouldn't be difficult to learn. And if you knew a programming language, you should be able to pretty much figure out what Go is doing. And I'm not necessarily the ideal sort of sample group for that, because I've been doing this for 40 years. If you want to fight me, fight these tears. No, wait, that's a song. But yeah, I have found it incredibly easy, and most things from C#.net and C and C++, they do map fairly closely to it, and it has generics now. So that makes life a bit easier, although it's generics with square brackets, which is just weird.
But just hack the font.
Yeah.
You can solve almost any problem with another layer of indirection, and the best layer of indirection is to replace the font with one which has the right shapes in the right places.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
But a couple of things that sort of leapt out at me was so Go's equivalent of .NET's dictionary is map, and you have a map of types. And if you try and get a value out of the map that's not in there, it puts the default value in for you. So it's like get or add. And if you want to find out if it's in there, then you have to say value, exists, colon equals map key, and then it won't put it in if it doesn't exist. It'll return false and the default value. And also the default value, so like the default value for a dictionary in .NET would be null. The default value for a map in Go is an empty map, but it's allocated on the stack, so it doesn't hit the garbage collector if you don't use it. And that's really nice. I like that. I thought, that's quite a good design decision. And the other thing is just the compiler works out whether the type you're using implements the interface that's required. You don't have to say, yes, this type implements this interface. So,
that's neat. I did. My question with programming languages is, I've always been very much driven by, I don't care about learning anything for the sake of learning it. I have to have a thing that I want to do. And somebody has to convince me that it is going to get me to where I want to be quicker if I learn the new tool and then use it to solve the problem than if I try to solve the problem using the things I already have. And the last time I seriously looked at doing anything with Go was because we wanted to build something that, by the way, I've just popped up a message. Eli's spouse, Tristan, says that cog is Germanic, maybe a Norse borrowing, and cognate is Latin from co-natus, meaning born together, so they are not cognate, which is interesting to me. Also, co-natus is one of those lovely, because you'd think cognate was cog and nate, but it's actually co and nate, like born, antenatal, prenatal, with a G on it, obviously. And I love words that split into the wrong bits, like helicopter, which looks like it's heli and copter, but it's helico and tear as separate words. So
Eli's also asking whether I'm using Service Weaver, and I'm not, and I have no idea what it is. I'm contributing to the Open Telemetry Collector Contrib project, adding a feature that Honeycomb would like it to have, and so they've sponsored the development.
Oh, that's neat.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking to myself, if I could just get people to sponsor me to contribute to open source projects, that would be one way to make a living.
So I was showing a group, I did some training last week with a company in Norway, and one of the things they asked about was, can you show us a spire? And this is the sort of I sometimes when I run classroom training sessions, I almost think I should have a dial on the wall behind me, and I just turn the dial to how many million pounds have run through systems that I built using the thing I'm teaching them now. Because there are some things where I'm like, look, if you took the code that I wrote using MVC, there's probably about 100 million euros worth of stuff has happened in the world that flowed through that without it falling down. So I know what I'm doing. And you turn it to Aspire and you're like, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows. This is preview 4. It may be gone tomorrow, but it's really good.
It is. It is. Very interesting.
My fear is that it is going to be a very chunky looking hammer, which turns a lot of problems that aren't nails into nails, and into distributed nails, which will cost a lot of money to run when you deploy them onto Microsoft Azure or wherever your deployment target of choice is. But as the thing that I found kind of interesting about it is almost not Aspire itself. It's the extent to which it puts OTel front and center as this is how you see what your applications are doing, and this is how it works. Which I think has always been a struggling point. Certainly, for me with OpenTelemetry is one of those things that if you do it in a small example project, it's pointless. Like a lot of, distributed application stuff, it's like, the hello world of OpenTelemetry is a completely pointless thing that obviously does not need to exist.
Yeah.
And so to actually get why it's important, you need to be prepared to put a serious amount of time into understanding the pitfalls of, instrumenting a large distributed application. And I think Aspire is the best thing I've seen yet that's like, no, you run this and you look at that and you look at that and you see that? Look. It ran across 2 different services, and you can see where it went and when it came back, which I thought was great. And I'm seeing some buzz now from folks saying, can we take the Aspire dashboard and run that for real in our clouds, please? Because we actually want that in production. And you're like, I'm pretty sure that's not what. Okay, go on then.
It's open source.
Yeah.
So you can grab the Blazor front end. I assume it's a Blazor front end.
Yeah.
And do what you want with it.
It's in Docker. There's a Docker image now available with just the Aspire dashboard in it, which is really, really kind of interesting and impressive stuff.
Yes, it is. So what else did we have on our list? Oh, Voyager.
First we've got to talk about the Ballmer peak.
Oh, right, the Ballmer peak, yes.
Because this
peak
came
is
out
real.
last week. So the Ballmer peak, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the internet cartoons of the last 20 years, it was XKCD, wasn't it?
It was.
It was the observation that there's a blood alcohol level that makes you formidably productive as a developer. And so you kind of, you have and it's like, now this, when I saw this, there is definitely a point where a certain amount of alcohol makes me better at playing the guitar. And this has been, one, it's something I've believed. 2, I've had other people say to me after rehearsals, that sounded really good tonight. And it's like, yeah, that's 1.6 cans of Red Stripe. That's exactly the right amount. Yes, there it is, the Ballmer peak. And so the joke is that there's a certain point where just you've hit that perfect balance. Now this reminded me. So this is the.
I just need to say the point that he chose as the blood alcohol concentration for the Ballmer peak is exactly 0.1337. Or elite, as we used to know that in the 2000s.
Elite hacksaws.
So yes, that's why the peak is precisely there on the chart.
And yes, a paper was published. Now, the Association for Computational Heresy, I had never come across this before, but a study was published recently in the Proceedings of Sig Bovik 2024. Now, I don't know if this is like a real symposium that is a bit jokey, or whether it's the proceedings of a fictional summit or what. I have no idea how real any of this is.
Yes.
But apparently, and it must be real because the authors are called someone with a real job and someone who's a real scientist. And
Tim Stone and Jazz Stoddart.
Yes. Their observation is that slightly less than 2 drinks conveys, improved programming ability. And this reminded me, Tom Stone. So Eli, this does not surprise me in the slightest. Tom Stone, I went to uni with him, brackets, them, question mark. I literally know one of them. Okay, so these are real people who apparently have done real science about how real booze makes you better at real programming. But there was a study in 2017 about the effects of alcohol on speaking a foreign language. And they took a bunch of folks living on the Dutch-German border who were learning Dutch. And they interviewed them speaking Dutch. One group had been drinking water. The other one had a measure of alcohol calibrated for their body mass. So they said it was about a pint of beer for a 75-kilo man. Yeah. And then what they did is they showed video of their conversations to native Dutch speakers and asked them to just rate the level of fluency. And they discovered that even if you don't think being slightly drunk makes you better at speaking Dutch, Dutch people do. And the sort of interesting thing, there is definitely a point, I think, for a lot of human endeavors at which you have lost your inhibitions without impairing your ability yet. Yes. And there's a certain amount of, certainly things like speaking foreign languages, nerves will trip you up horribly. Yeah. I know so many people, they can read it, they have the vocabulary, they know what the words mean. You ask them to say something and they just freeze like a deer in headlights because they don't know what word to use and they don't know how to pronounce it and they don't want to look silly and have a beer or two. Now I broke my leg skiing about 10 years ago, and it turns out that being in shock makes me able to speak French, not fluently but surprisingly well. Because my father said to me later, I didn't know you spoke French that well. And I was like, no. I'd been chatting away to the paramedics about how I had a job in London and I worked with computers and I built a website to help actors find jobs in television. And I just remember being like, this French is pretty easy, actually. No, yes. I'm not that good. I don't ever believe that I, learned it to that level. But there's something about, kind of slightly reframing the way you look at it. So Renee's question is, how can you stay at the peak?
And apparently Apple use an IV schnapps drip to keep their programmers at precisely that level. So yeah, according to this study.
I have actually tried this. I have tried before when doing band rehearsals to drink a beer before the rehearsal and then try to drink at the exact pace necessary to it's hard.
Yes.
Because what happens is that fatigue kicks in because you get tired. And then because you've been drinking alcohol, you get tired quicker, and being tired makes you sloppier. And so you fall off the peak. Not that this is rigorous science, you understand. If anyone wants to sponsor a study into the effects of Red Stripe on Sweet Child of Mine guitar solos, I volunteer as tribute. It's totally my jam. But
just on the thing of French, I had the loveliest experience last week. I was doing the keynote at Devox France on Thursday last week, and whenever I speak in French-speaking languages, because I do sort of speak a reasonable French, I always start with this whole bit about avant de commencer, je dois juste m'excuse, mais je ne parle pas français, pas un même peu, parce que je suis anglais. Et les Anglais, nous n'apprenons pas les autres langues. And it's this whole thing about, if you don't understand us, we talk slower and louder and everything. And it got laughs and it kind of kicked off the keynote. And then I went into programming's greatest mistakes. But the thing was, afterwards, when people, because this Devox have no idea who I am. It's mostly enterprise Java programmers who go to Devox and they have no idea who I am. And so, people were coming up and kind of going, "Oh, I really liked," but they were doing it in French because they assumed that I spoke French. And so then I was saying to them, "Je parle français, mais quand tu parles français, Je ne le comprends pas. And when you're just a random tourist in a shop or something and you try and speak French to French people and then don't understand them, they just switch to English because they all speak English. And so it's very difficult to get French people to speak French to you in a more slowly. But because I'd done this keynote and they were kind of like, "Oh, I really like you. It was funny and everything," they said they talked French more slowly. And it was brilliant because I could understand. They were pronouncing the words and leaving little gaps in between them and everything. And
that's
so
cool.
I was talking French to French people. It was really lovely. And yeah, I had a great time at Devox France. They were extremely welcoming, and it was a pleasant experience all around.
The closest I ever got to seriously investing time in learning a foreign language was I started learning Russian. Because I had done 7 trips to Russia and 7 trips to Ukraine and 2 trips to Belarus, and thought there's a lot of really interesting opportunities over there in software development and collaboration. This goes as probably item number 6 on 10 reasons you should never trust Dylan to pick the right horse in any metaphorical horse race ever. So alphabet's quite cool, though. Being able to read Cyrillic is fun.
Yes. Eli says, "Did you get a tree at Devox Greece? They gave me an olive tree." Was that to like bring home with you, or is there an olive tree somewhere in a grove in Greece that is officially yours? Inquiring minds need to know. Hi, Derek.
Oh, hi, Danny. Welcome. There is the whole thing about, I got you a tiger. And you're like, does that mean that you've sponsored a wild tiger, or there's a tiger in a zoo, or should I be very careful going into the bedroom?
Yes. No, it is apparently an actual olive tree in a box. And it's a fine addition to Eli's collection of trees.
Trees?
I don't know. Who knows? So yes, but yes, the Ballmer Peak is a real thing.
Yes,
and but do not turn up to work drunk.
No. You go to work sober.
Mark
you go
and Dylan
at lunchtime. You come back drunk.
Yes, and then you get more productive in the afternoon.
I spent over a decade working in Soho at the sort of peak of new media and everything, and it was the line between working in media in Soho and just being an alcoholic was a very blurry line indeed.
Yes.
Good times. We learned a lot, but
one of the reasons I don't drink very much anymore is that I skated dangerously close to alcoholism when I was doing stand-up, because I worked in pubs.
Yeah.
And that was another, comedians very firmly believe in the pre-show pint to take the edge off before you go on. And then most of them also believe in the post-show several more pints and then ending up in the whiskey bar at the top floor of Filthy McNasty's.
Well, it's not like they need to be up in the morning.
That was my favorite thing.
So apparently Google have improved JPEG.
Yeah, this threw me. They've made it like 35% better. So 35% better compression with actually slightly better image quality. Yeah. They're using 10-bit instead of 8-bit encoding. And if you use Google's new JPEG coding library to encode your JPEG, it will come out better quality at a smaller file size, but all the existing JPEG decoders can still read it. And I'm just like, that's clever. To change the encoding of a format to make it smaller and better and not break compatibility with any of the JPEG decoders that are out there. I would like to know more about how that happened. And there's not a lot of information about how it happened. But they use adaptive quantization to reduce noise and improve image quality. and improved quantization matrix selection. And I needed to draw this to your attention because I know how JPEG works from your talk.
Yes,
which covers how JPEG works.
That's one of my favorite talk. This is a talk I haven't done for a couple of years, but the lovely thing about it is it's one of those talk. I talk about the JPEG encoding is basically you take an image and you break it down into a series of waves, and the mathematics for this is formidably complicated. But it turns out that if you have basically, this is Fourier transforms, is you can take any signal and break it down into the sum of a set of sine waves at certain frequencies. And this works in 2 dimensions as well as 1. And so when you do a JPEG compression, you basically cut the image into little squares, and then you work out the combination of waveforms and magnitudes, multipliers that you need to recreate that. But then you can choose to throw away the fiddly bits.
Yes.
And I everywhere that I did this talk, I'd go up to someone ahead of time. I'd be like, I need to know, what is your local dish here? Like, what do they make? And I'd find a recipe for it. And I'd be like, okay, we're going to remove ingredients from this thing one by one until everyone in the audience goes, you can't do that. And so I took this. There's a thing, I did it at NDC in Minnesota. There's a thing called a Minnesota hot dish, which is like this weird, you take like an oven tray or like a baking tray, and you put tater tots and canned soup and beef mince and all these and it's one of those things like the staples have to be there, but then it's like, and all right, so we're going to make a tater tot casserole, we're going to make a hot dish, and so we're going to put in a little bit of salt and some bay leaves and some garlic and some onions, and I'm like, well, we haven't got any onions, so we take that out, and the audience is fine. And you're like, and there's no bay leaf, so we take that out. And then you take out the tater tots, and everyone go, oh, no. And it's like, right, there we go. Lossy compression is we throw away the ingredients no one cares about. Not a tray, a casserole dish. Yes, that's, thank you, Origami Marie. So
I assume in Porto you do that with that insane sandwich that's like a
the francesinha,
the francesinha, which is, if you're not familiar with the francesinha, it's a guaranteed coronary bypass operation.
So I tried that, but the problem was there's nothing you can leave out of a francesinha without upsetting the locals. So I did it with a thing called a cozido de portuguesa instead, which is like some kind of sausage casserole, which is a lot more. Yeah, they're like, oh no, if it doesn't have ham and bacon and cheese and egg and steak and beer and wine and Tabasco in it, it's not a proper francesinha. And you're like, right, because otherwise it's just a sandwich,
Yes.
So I wanted to use that one, but it didn't work. But
it's their sandwich. They should know.
The whole thing about JPEG encoding is that the decoding process is basically you have the dictionary, if you like, is as deployed as part of the decoder. It's not part of the image. And so the image is just the ingredients list. Take 0.5 of this plus 0.1 of that plus 0.2 of that, and you split this across there's a black and white channel, and there's a red-green channel and a yellow-blue channel. It's the CMY, CRY, whatever the color model they use in television is called. It's interesting. But I can, without understanding the details, JPEG is the kind of thing where you could come up with a much better way of getting the data into it, that the existing decoders are just like, oh yeah, I know how this thing works. It's fine. But it is a very, very clever algorithm and fascinating to figure out how it works. And I'm really glad I've never had to implement it.
Yes. So Origami Marie says canned cream of something soup, usually mushroom, is also required.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about Americans and what they think is cooking, is there are so many American recipes where
canned soup is an ingredient.
Single ingredients is canned, usually condensed, because they do like the Campbell's cream of mushroom, where if you're making it into soup, you put it in the pan and then you fill the can with water and then put that in the pan as well, and then it turns into soup. But if you're making a kind of pasta bake, then you just put dry pasta and the sloppy stuff out of a can of soup in a little bowl and stick it in the oven. And you go, I cooked. But yes, you did. Yes. Okay. Well done.
I realized the duality of cooking versus laziness is I once ordered KFC on Deliveroo, and while it was on the way, I made my own mayonnaise from scratch. Because it's just, I cannot fry chicken better than an international franchise because they have specialist equipment for that and the secret herbs and spices. But my mayonnaise is a lot better than theirs.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's like using a NuGet package for something that's kind of too boring and difficult to write, but then
JPEG
writing
compression.
the interesting bit of your code yourself.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So why not? Why not?
Outsource where it is not a strategic differentiator for you.
Kendall's here. Hello, Kendall. And
saying, hey, Kendall.
Over the ultimate treat, Kraft mac and cheese. I have to be very drunk.
So being familiar with, so it's interesting how transatlantic culture, you get introduced to it in different ways. I didn't know Kraft was spelt with a K, because I was introduced to it by If I Had $1 Million by the band Bare Naked Ladies, which has the line, if we had $1 million, we wouldn't have to eat Kraft dinner. And I assumed Kraft dinner was like craft beer. Like, it was dinner that had been crafted, and so the line made no sense. And it wasn't until a long time, probably 5 or 10 years afterwards, that I discovered that Kraft dinner is like a ready meal, and it's spelt with a K, and that line actually is about, if we had a bunch of money, we wouldn't eat low-cost convenience food, but we'd just eat more, and we'd have really expensive ketchups like Dijon ketchup.
Yes.
So
yes, reminds me of the bit in, I think it's Microsurfs. One of the characters has shut himself in his office and will only eat things that can be slid under the door.
Bug barbecue,
barbecue, and he's living on Kraft cheese slices and Lunchables.
I want to talk about Voyager.
I want to talk about
Voyager 1 because it's so cool.
It's talking to us again.
I know.
And it's incredible. This is a thing that's been in deep space for most of our lives. I was born in 1973, so I was 5 when the Voyagers were launched. 4. 1977, not 78.
Yeah, 77. August and September 77.
And they were designed to go to... So Voyager 1 went to Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn.
Yep.
And then hurtled off out of the solar system at a kind of... So heading upwards, it's not on the elliptical plane. It's not sort of in the same plane as all the planets. And then Voyager 2... also went to Neptune and Uranus, and then sort of went off going south. Yeah. So they're both going out. But Voyager 1 is going a lot faster than Voyager 2.
It's doing so I'm my Monday Geek Out YouTube thing is going to be about Voyager, because I have some stuff about it that I've looked into before. Voyager 1 is 168 astronomical units away. It's 24 billion kilometers. It's moving at 17 kilometers per second.
Yes.
And they in November it started sending garbled telemetry, as in it was still transmitting, we just couldn't figure out what it was saying because the transmissions had all got messed up. And the folks at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which so the irony in all this, of course, is that Voyager does not use jet propulsion, and very little of the stuff that the JPL does involves vehicles that use jets to propel themselves. But
it's too late to rename it.
Naming things is hard. And so the JPL were like, let's see if we can figure out what's going on with it. And they've been sending various commands to, reboot it and see if they can get it to send them a memory dump. And they finally did a couple of weeks ago. And they worked out that one of the chips in the flight data subsystem had stopped working. And then they figured out that they could, by sending radio signals 24 billion kilometers, they could basically patch the operating system. They moved all of those FDS routines into different locations in memory, and then patched all of the other operational code to reference the new routine locations. And then they said, all right, wakey, wakey. And it went, oh, hello, good morning. And everyone went, wow, Voyager's back.
2 days later. Because it takes 22 and a
22
half hours.
22 and a half hours round trip. So
light
this is
speed.
like, what are you going to do today? I'm going to ping Voyager, and then I'm going to come back tomorrow afternoon and see if it worked. And if it didn't, I'll ping it again, and then I'll go home for the weekend, and I'll come back.
I do wonder whether people at JPL get paid hourly or a salary. Because if it's hourly, it's kind of what you have to fill in a timesheet saying what you were doing. 45 hours waiting for Voyager to ping me back. Can I put that on my timesheet?
Yeah.
I also spent some time playing Baldur's Gate 3 while I was waiting.
I know that the team who run the Mars rovers, they work Martian days in like Pasadena or somewhere. And so they there's a couple of like diners and restaurants nearby that open Martian hours because they know that all of the Spirit and Opportunity crews and Pathfinder crews and everything will be knocking off at 4 o'clock in the morning and going for dinner. And so
yes,
they have this whole little microcosm community that operates on Martian time, just because it sort of makes sense that the people who are watching what's happening on Mars at Martian sunrise are the same people who did the sunrise shift yesterday.
Yes.
So
Kendall's asking what you think comes out the back end of a rocket, and I can answer that.
Yeah,
it is enormous quantities of vaporized money traveling at extremely high velocities. But yes,
water.
I mean technically it's sort of jet. Is it
water?
I don't know what qualifies as a jet, but yes, water.
So a jet technically is anything that generates motive force based on a turbine that is powered by its own propulsion.
Yeah.
So a jet engine is one, like a jet engine spins, but it doesn't have a motor. You have to get it up and running, but at a certain point, you basically suck air in the front, pump fuel into it, set it on fire. It comes whooshing out the back, and as it whooshes, it spins the thing that sucks the air in and pumps the fuel in. And that was Frank Whittle, the guy who invented the jet engine. That was his kind of great, leap of insight, was that if you got an engine up to speed, it would actually, you could use the burning fuel to spin the turbine, which sucked the air in, which pushed the outlet, which burned the fuel, and you'd get this kind of self-sustaining thing that would keep going without having, like a cylinder engine or an electric motor or anything like that. I mean, okay, Kendall is technically right. It is a jet of something. But
yes. At some point, when we have one of those ones where I'm available and you're not, I'm going to get Kendall on and talk about jet engines, because I know he enjoys that. But Voyager, I mean, both Voyagers, there's no propulsion at all now. It's just inertia.
There is. Voyager 1 still has tiny amounts of residual fuel.
It does, but it's using it for orientation rather than
they just use it to steer, to keep the dish aligned. I mean, at this point, there is no point at steering anywhere. There is literally nothing for about 50 astronomical units in every direction.
Yes.
Like over there, what's over there? Literally nothing.
Literally
what have we got here? Literally nothing. We've got one hydrogen molecule per square meter.
Woohoo! So the next thing that sort of exists, and we have a name for it, that Voyager is going to encounter, Voyager 1 will get there in about 300 years, is the Oort cloud.
Yeah.
Which is a huge sphere of ice and comets, basically, and long-term comets, the ones that come by, like Halley's Comet, which is every 76 years. They originate from the Oort cloud, and we can't see it because they're not big enough, and they're very, very far away,
and very, very far apart,
50,000 times further from the sun than we are. And the chances, there is a minuscule chance that when Voyager gets there, it will hit something, but it is minuscule. The distances between them are millions, if not billions of kilometers. And that's the last thing that counts as part of our solar system and is getting dragged along with the sun and everything else as we hurtle through space.
40,000 years of nothing. And then Wolf 359 or something. It's going to come within several light years, but by that point,
it's going to take it longer than Star Trek thought it would to reach Borg space, get turned into a super
Yes.
intelligent probe, rename itself to Voyager because somehow the vacuum of space has deleted some of the letters, and comes back demanding to speak to whoever's in charge.
That was a better movie than most people give it credit for. It had some really nice ideas.
It had some nice moments and everything.
Yeah.
It was, but no. The other thing I really like about Voyager is I saw an animation of it, and so because Voyager 1 exited the solar system at a kind of 30-degree angle to the elliptical plane, and so it's gone what we call north. And then if you zoom out again and look at the sun doing its orbit of the Milky Way at 220 kilometers a second, it's sort of the planets are going round it almost vertically. So it's kind of like a weird vortex spiral thing that it describes as it goes along. But because Voyager went out at 30 degrees above that plane, and given the speed that it's traveling, it's leading the charge. It's in front of the sun as we hurtle around the Milky Way, and that's brilliant.
It does get really difficult with this kind of thing to come up with any frame of reference that makes sense.
It really does. It's like when you say it's traveling at 17 kilometers a second, which it is, but it's traveling at 17 kilometers per second relative to the sun. It's traveling at 237 kilometers a second if you talk relative to the Milky Way. And then you've got the Milky Ways heading for Andromeda and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's just completely nuts.
So we
built that in 1976.
I know. It's got a tape deck on it. Voyager 1 has a tape recorder that's still working. I was looking this up yesterday. You can see the spaceflight operation schedule for November the 9th, 2023 has a playback instruction in it.
Yes.
Literally, it's you're like, oh, that means rewind and play back whatever you found. And I love that. It's so excellent. Anyway, I'm going to geek out about that on YouTube on Monday. I'm recording that after we finish the show today. It's going to be my my YouTube video for the week is all about Voyager 1 and all the cool things like the Vidicon tube they used to take the pale blue dot photograph and that kind of stuff.
My favorite photograph ever. But no, so yes, Voyager 1.
So Eli saw some speculative fiction about cetaceans being used for space dogfighting because they naturally think in 3 dimensions. Stephen Baxter has a whole thing about sending spacecraft with squid on board instead of humans, because squid can think and navigate in 3D and can communicate visually and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And so there's
Adrian Tchaikovsky book about octopuses as well. One of the Time trilogy.
Children of Ruin.
Time.
Yeah,
Children of Ruin.
First one.
Children of Time, Children of Ruin, and Children of Everything's Gone to Hell.
So Adrian Tchaikovsky writes books faster than I can read them. Yes. And I have a theory that he is an infinite number of spiders sat at an infinite number of word processors. But the books that really kind of baked my noodle about frames of reference and that kind of stuff. So one of them was that. The other one, which is now I know that Orson Scott Card is a questionable human being, has toxic opinions, but Ender's Game was and if you can separate the art from the artist, Ender's Game is a really, really good book. And definitely don't Google it before you read it. Just read it. It's very, very good.
Yes. So, and Dave Aronson has said, isn't that how squid and octopuses got here in the first place?
If they did, where are their spaceships?
Buried under an enormous amount of ocean sediment at the bottom, probably.
Yeah.
It is, but there is there's a biological thing with squid and octopus that they are really the common ancestor between octopuses and almost every other sort of form of life with a brain and a heart and organs and all that sort of stuff. It goes right the way back to like single-celled organisms. That's where the branch is. It's like some single-celled organisms went, we are going to become the complexity of life like you can't possibly imagine. All the insects and the trees and the plants and the fungus and the mammals and the fish and the birds. And then just this other couple of single-celled organisms went, yeah, we're going to do octopuses. We'll see you later.
You get another bunch of like, you know what? Sharks, yeah. Pretty good.
Sharks, yes.
Sharks and crocodiles, like, you know, hundreds of millions of years ago went, yeah, this'll do. Yeah. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
But no, I am in no way vegan or vegetarian, and I have no particular intention of becoming so. I'm trying to eat a bit more plant-based and not have meat all the time, but purely in a climate sort of environment way. But on principle, I will never eat octopus again.
Yeah.
Because they are clever. Yeah. They decorate bits of the sea floor to attract mates, and they can figure things out. They've got octopuses have a little mini brain in each tentacle, and so they can't figure things out by looking at it, but if they can feel it and put all their tentacles around, they're like the original distributed system. Yeah. They're like a little Kubernetes cluster just bouncing around the ocean, figuring things out. And I love them. And we shouldn't eat them. I mean, we probably shouldn't eat cows either. But I've never seen a cow solve a maze the way an octopus can solve a maze with puzzles and things in it.
I've seen octopus when I've been scuba diving before, and they're just the most astonishing, unlikely alien things. You know, you're sort of just floating there. I had one once on a decompression stop coming up a wall dive, and you just kind of, you know, hanging there for 2 or 3 minutes waiting till your dive computer says you can go up, and then the rock winks at you, and you're like, oh, and it just looks at you, and suddenly you're like, and you know, it's looking at you, it's figuring stuff out, and you're like, don't mind me, just you chill, I'll be off.
Yeah. But I mean, because they can completely change color. And they can also change their texture. Yeah. So they can make themselves spiky.
Yeah.
And
they could turn into Rubik's Cubes if they really wanted to.
They probably could. And it's just beautiful.
Let's talk about robot dogs with flamethrowers attached to their
heads. Go on then. Let's just squeeze it in here at the end, because can you buy them?
Yes. So this, let me just find. So somebody has taken. You've seen the Boston Dynamics quadruped security whole thing, and you can now buy a flamethrower. So basically, someone has taken that and they've put a flamethrower on the back of it, and it is completely legal in 48 US states, and you can buy it online
because of the Second Amendment.
$9,420. Apparently, it's ideal for weed control.
Is it?
Like if you have a certain amount of undergrowth that you would really like to burn, but you also don't want to get off your lawn chair and go out there and flamethrower it old school style. It's got a LiDAR sensor on board, first-person navigation through an onboard camera. It's got an app. And it's the Unitree Go-To Robot Quadruped, which is $1,600 if you buy just the dog. And it's got a 30-foot flamethrowing range and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, fueled by gasoline or napalm.
That's
what a time to be alive, hey? And I saw this come out, and I was like, get one of those, and just like take it out with you and take it on the tube, and people will be like, "What are you going to do about it?" And you're like, "I've got a robot dog with a flamethrower," and I'd be like, "I'm really sorry." Yes, I'm getting off this train now, and I'm not going to bother the other passengers ever again. And you wouldn't even need the flamethrower. You just need something that looked like the flamethrower on a robot dog.
Yes, just something with just enough gas to keep the pilot light going, so it looked like the flamethrower was just a button press away.
So apparently, it's just a loophole in the federal device regulation that 48 states are like. A flamethrower itself is not specifically illegal, although obviously if you set someone's house on fire, that's still a crime, and if you hurt someone, that's still a crime. And Maryland, you need a license, and California, you're only allowed a flamethrower that can fire up to 10 feet. So,
which is probably why Elon moved to Texas.
Quite possibly. So
See, I
yeah.
was walking back from the shop the other day, and the shop is probably 600 meters from my house, maybe 800 meters. And I go down there, and I buy large quantities of milk, like a gallon of milk, and that's really heavy. And so quite a lot of the time I drive to the shop
Yeah.
because I want to buy milk and then some other things that are also heavy, like some drinks or whatever. And I was thinking, get one of those tartan trolleys like the old ladies have that you can just push along in front of you. And then I thought, no, the robot dog,
Yeah.
but with panniers.
Yeah.
And how has that not been productized? Yeah, that's the obvious use for robot dogs, is that they are carrier things for elderly people and me.
So I do, often think there is because I do lots of things with musical instruments and guitars and PA systems and that kind of stuff. And at the moment I have like I'm going to do this with luggage, as in everything has to be 23 kilos in one suitcase.
Yeah.
And then there's just this gap of like, no, well, at this point I'm going to have to take the car. At which point it's like I might as well throw in an extra piano, because what the hell, I'm driving anyway, use all the space. And there is a certain, like, there are definitely shows that I could play in venues, local bars and stuff around here, where I'm like, I can't really do this just with a guitar, but if I had like a little trolley that would take a couple of speakers and a projector or something. And it doesn't seem to I mean, there's stuff on Amazon, and you can get sack trolleys for parcels and shopping trolleys and things. But it's like, where's the automatic, autonomous, just you put your stuff in it and you switch it on and it just follows you down the road and doesn't crash into anything?
Because I went for a wander in Paris on Friday last week, just walked from the hotel to Gare du Nord, which is about a 90-minute walk. And I was dragging my carry-on suitcase behind me with its little hard wheels that make an enormous amount of noise that I couldn't hear because I was listening to Muse. And I was thinking, somebody has invented a suitcase that follows you, but it's still on those same stupid wheels, which means it can't follow you up a curb or across a cattle grid or something. Whereas a Boston Dynamics robot dog could follow you through tougher terrain than I could actually navigate myself. So it is the ideal solution to that problem. Although how many pianos a robot dog could carry? You'd need quite a big one.
One at each end.
Yes.
That would make a great statement.
That's it. A kind of, but no, so somebody make that. Or
just, as Dave says, the luggage. Just make the luggage.
The luggage.
The Terry Pratchett luggage with little feet, and it just runs around and follows you about.
And that would kills people with a flamethrower.
There we go. That's it. That is our free idea that we have on every one of these shows, and we give away to anyone who wants to take it and get rich. Make the luggage.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the legs.
With the little legs and the lid, and you just throw all your stuff in it, and it doesn't necessarily have to eat people, but if you could figure that out, it might be a bonus.
Yeah. Yes. And then redesign airplanes to work with that kind of luggage. So you split up at the point where you're getting on, and your luggage goes one way and gets in the hold, and then you go the other. Yeah.
And if you could possibly figure it so that the doors don't fall off at the same time, that'd be a bonus.
This is the world that liberals want.
I think we should wrap it up there.
I think we should.
Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. We'll see all of you back on YouTube at 4:00 UK time next week. Take it easy. Look after each other. Have a good week. We'll see you soon.
Yeah. Take care of yourselves. Bye.